This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and our personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing number. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision for success in business and personal life. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we welcome an old friend of mine onto the show. Expect to hear what being present truly means to us, why giving back to your community doesn't have to wait until you're rich, and how to find your purpose in life, and much more. But first, Sander and I like to start every episode with a brief update on our business and personal lives so that when we look back on this in the future, we can gauge roughly where we're at in our lives. What do you have for business this week?
Got some podcast work buttoned up and some posts scheduled up and went through your descriptions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So looking good in that sector of things. And then in terms of the main business, some employee training documents have been gone through, some system analysis stuff and kind of rework of prioritization from the main business side of things has been gone through as well. And then just refinements. And I think you had a couple of insurance things maybe to update.
I do. I did a lot of insurance stuff. We put together a document just covering the fundamentals of what kind of insurance a business needs. And then on top of that, every business has different insurance requirements, and some insurance companies are more like to cover certain businesses than others. So for whatever kind of business you're starting, before you get going full steam ahead into it, I would find it valuable to put together a long list of insurance providers near you that you can go speak to them in person or on the phone just to gauge their temperature and then have the ability to speak to them in person. I'm a face-to-face kind of guy. So I've started a long list. Right now I've got, I think, 30 insurance companies within a 20 square mile radius of us that we can go talk to about this. And I'm going to expand that to roughly 50 before I stop. But I don't want to have any shortage of people to talk to in case we run into trouble getting our business insured. It's a little bit different. I just want to have our asses covered. I also have recorded that we did reprioritize all of our tasks because we're coming up on a major milestone. We want to have our heads clear and really identify what do we need to have hands on right now versus what can we kind of push off to later on.
I think the priority from my end of things has been focusing on how are we going to get the employees trained and operating smoothly in the business. So that's where my main focus has gone in terms of documents this week. But there is a bunch of stuff in our kind of tracking document that's still to go through, but also a good amount of stuff that could be left until after the business opens. So not too much concern in that respect. I think we have plenty of time. I honestly think that if we were to get money thrown at us tomorrow and have to open in 3 months, we'd probably do a great job.
I think so too.
Yeah. So it's not really a point of super concern, but it would be nice to really have the opportunity to implement all of our systems 100%.
Yeah. I mean, they can say you're never truly ready to make the jump. You will constantly prepare. At a certain point, we will run out of documents, but I know us, and I know that we could probably take the rest of our lives getting ready for this and still come up with documents to make. I think that probably 3 months ago, we won't. Yeah. I think that analysis paralysis and all that. I think that 3 months ago, if you dropped lottery money in our hands, we would have been able to execute it sufficiently. Now I think we can execute it well. And I think in 3 months' time, we'll execute it perfectly. I think we'll actually fucking crush it.
Not even 3 months. I think a month and a half. I don't think it's going to take that long to get through the rest of the stuff we have. But anyways, that's all too nuanced for the audience to get anything out of.
Sure.
But I'm really you guys will see what we're doing.
I'm looking forward to getting to the point. We mentioned this week as well, speaking specifics about our business in the podcast. It's difficult before deals go through because you don't want to give away proprietary information or investors' interests and things like that. But once we have those things locked in, I really want to talk about like the specific details of what this business is, how it operates, and why we are interested in it.
Yeah. I think I mentioned kind of like doing little tidbit stuff as we progress.
Yeah.
To kind of like bleed the podcast in a positive way into our main business and kind of mesh those two together. So it's not like we're like preparing for a podcast and preparing for a business. It's like we're preparing for a business that then the podcast, gets fruit from.
Yeah. Yep. And speaking of the podcast, the last business update that I have is merchandise in our website. Last week, we decided that we won't have ads on this podcast. We never will. We're not going to have a Patreon. I would like money to pay for camera equipment and editors and stuff. And I think that the best way to do that is through merchandise, because it's not only accepting donation and support from our listeners, but it's also a way to advertise our podcast to more people as well.
Right.
You wouldn't get that from a Patreon. So I think that that's ultimately the best way to go. But with this business ramping up, it's not our priority right now. So eventually we'll have t-shirts ready to order on an individual basis. If we run into someone and they're like, I'd like a large, then we can just take Venmo money and order a shirt in for them. But it's not going to be a priority. So that's all for my business updates. Do you have life updates?
Did a Miata oil change and my squirrels are getting big.
Your squirrels?
Yeah.
Does the audience know about your squirrels?
I don't know. I rescued 2 squirrels. They were this big and now they're like this.
What do you name them?
Squivel 1 and Squivel 2, because I can't tell them apart.
I told Grace today and she was like, squirrels? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, what the fuck does that mean? And I told her and she was like, what the fuck, Sanders? She's like, first he's got birds, now he's got squirrels. Like, what the hell is the deal?
Well, the birds are gone.
Well, I told him the plan is to upgrade to a raccoon and then a deer in his garage.
Yeah.
But I told her
a hunting rifle and the deer will run around my backyard.
I told her your plan to move them to the back porch and like get a heating pad with a bed and stuff in there and then let the door out to let them out and in.
Yeah, screw that. I'm going to teach them to bring me wrenches.
You're going to keep them in the garage?
Yeah.
If you think they like climbing over you, just wait till they climb over the Porsche. You're going to fucking hate that.
I don't care. I'm cool. They can screw around in there. That's fine.
My biggest life update this week is that I bit my tongue harder than I've ever bit it in my entire life. And then I think I chewed on it in my sleep. Like it hurt last week before we recorded and I just like powered through for the podcast and talked through it. I was in immense pain. And all week I knew that I needed to be healed for this podcast. Fortunately, I am. And I did that by sleeping more. So I slept on average, I think 9.5 hours a night every night this week. And I feel fucking awesome. I wish I could sleep that much every night.
I slept that much all this week, and then Friday night I slept 3.5 hours.
There you go.
And last night I
slept
it offsets. 5.
It offsets though, because 9 hours every night.
So I can go like another 2 weeks at like 5.
Yeah, there you go. It offsets.
So,
but I feel fantastic and my tongue is better. Yesterday we went racing for the first time. I don't think that we've been racing in 6 months.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's been a long fucking time. But I had a lot of fun and I'm glad that we went.
It has been a while. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the next time that we go. 100 subscribers. We're going to go racing. We're going to have a film guy there to film us. And then we're going to make a
next
podcast.
Week, buying 85 subscribers.
Yeah. All right. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Today, we welcome my friend Christian Dossett as a guest on the Vision 79 podcast. I know Christian personally from my time rowing at Florida Tech, and as most rowers can attest, the men you row with will be brothers for the rest of your life, no matter how far apart you may grow. Growth is something Christian is no stranger to. From the moment we met, I recognized Christian to be a deep thinker, a kind soul, and above all else, charitable almost to a fault. Christian has completed a successful career in rowing, serving as team captain for the Florida Tech men's rowing team throughout my years on the team with him, and he studied philosophy at the same time, balancing schoolwork and an elite level of physical training, while still finding time to dedicate to deep thinking, pursuing personal growth, and recording his journey in his own podcast, The Dossett Pen. Welcome on, Christian. Come on in.
Thank you.
We're excited to have a few hours of your time and attention. Did I miss anything in your introduction?
I'm a husband and I have a dog.
There you go.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's actually a new development from the last time I saw you. Mm-hmm. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been maybe a couple of years.
What's married life like?
It's the best thing that I never saw coming.
You never saw it coming?
At the time, I think I decided I will take my time to develop myself to be the person that I would the kind of person that I would like to spend the rest of my life with.
Mm-hmm.
And then just comes out of left field and I meet this girl and I almost know pretty instantly that she's going to be my wife. And we've just been developing our life together, and it's just the most beautiful thing that I never saw coming.
How did you meet?
We met at a bar, actually.
Mm-hmm.
In O'Galley. It's named after a fox. I can't remember.
Salty Fox.
Salty Fox. That's right.
Back in the day.
we used to drink a lot in college specifically. In our senior year, we would hit that.
I had a gift card there. It was awesome.
Really? Yeah.
It's like a $50 gift card.
That's fine.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
How did you know?
How did I know?
How did you know right away that she was the one?
I wouldn't say right away. I wouldn't say the time that we met in the bar, but I'd say the time that we had started to committing to dating, which, may have not been until 3 months later after we met. I started spending that time with her, and I decided I wanted to be very intentional, let her know my intentions at that time in my life. And then once we decided to be like exclusive and continue to date each other, I drafted up something I called the Constellation of Two, which was like a constitution of our relationship. And I told her how I wanted to continue in this relationship, and I wanted her to keep pursuing the things that she loved to pursue, and I wanted to keep pursuing the same things that I wanted to pursue, and that we weren't going to let anytime soon like this super gravitational force pull us in together to become this black hole that, you see a lot of people get stuck in these like very dependent relationships very quickly. I said, no, for as long as we possibly can, we're going to be this constellation of two, until we, got to become one through marriage. So we did our best to do that and keep developing ourselves and just practice this super open communication. And I guess it was just during that time spending with her, anyone that meets her, I think, will tell you that they experienced love through her in a way that they don't often experience from people. I especially felt that way. And she's taught me just so much about what love really is. And I think just from that get-go, I knew that I wanted to be her best friend for the rest of her life and mine.
Do you think her reaction to your Constellation of Two ideology played a big role in committing to that long term?
It could have. It could have. It probably played a part. I know when I spoke my vows at her wedding, I mentioned that document, right? And she, it caught her, it meant something to her, and you can tell that it meant something to her. But it was just being intentional from the get-go. I now work at a gym, and there was a young man the other day who was talking to me, just asking for some relationship advice. He's a younger guy, maybe 19, 20 years old. And he had somebody who was previously in a relationship with reach out to him recently and ask to like start things back up. She was like, oh, I need to like go off and grow by myself. I can't grow while I'm with you. And wanted to start things back up recently. And I was like, dude, you have two options, right? First thing that I would recommend is run for the hills. Don't get sucked back into that. But if you do, first thing you want to know is her intentions. Like, why is she wanting to open back up to you in this way? And, I don't want you to do that on Snapchat. Like, the sooner you get rid of that app, the deeper your relationships will grow with everyone you do know. And just don't have that as an option for social communication in your life. And secondly, if you are going to ask that question, ask a why, wait till you're in person. You shouldn't develop the relationship on the phone, whether it be a text or a call. Invite her out for coffee somewhere that you can go for a walk from. And while you're on that walk, the blood's moving, you're in like calm states, open up to each other and figure out where you're going to move forward from there. It was practicing things like that, I think, around that time when I felt like I'd start to develop myself into, I guess, an adult, that I had met my wife, that I could see it cherish, this cherished relationship bloom.
It's interesting that in that example, the girl in this scenario mentioned that she can't grow while she's in a relationship. She has to do it on her own. I think that I personally hold the value that relationships are stronger if you grow better together. And I think it's one of the fundamental reasons that our relationship, Sander and I's, is so strong, because I think that at the beginning of any relationship, you don't have a true understanding for who the other person is, even if you're friends. But committing to changing together on the same path, so long as the path stays the same, will ultimately yield a stronger relationship than growing separately and then meeting in the middle. Does that make sense? Do you feel the same way?
Yeah.
I think that...
do you think that you and your wife are on the same path? Because you mentioned earlier that you kind of had like two separate lives in a way while you were dating. Like you were two separate constellations, right? In that sense, like, do you think that you guys have separate paths? Do you think that the point of marriage is to like find the person that you can walk the path with and grow on that path with together? Or is it to experience life with someone who has a different perspective and brings another side that you wouldn't otherwise see?
Yeah, I would say more the latter.
Okay, interesting.
It also opens us up to more opportunities together. You know, we, you know, something could come her way and I decide, yeah, let's commit to this. Or something comes my way as an opportunity and she says, yeah, this would be a great way to steer our life. But, you know, once you get married, and I was trying to be like very traditional in this relationship where like, hey, I don't want to move in together before we get married. Like, I don't want to make major life decisions with you until I know that you want to make major life decisions with me for the rest of our lives. And it was sort of creating these boundaries at the time because we did have separate paths leading up till we met each other. Right. And then once we did, part of this constitution was taking like everything under the umbrella of God, going to him first and then coming back together and just moving forward through love and opportunity and how we can best serve our communities. So yeah, that's different paths to begin with and just a plethora of opportunities in front of us.
Do you think that God, sorry, go ahead. Do you think that God is the unifier within your relationship? I mean, I know that like, at least from a Christian perspective, right? I assume you're Christian.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's Christian. Christian Dossett.
Thanks. But, you know, at least from a marriage perspective, a lot of Christians hold the belief, which I think is a very valid belief, that marriage does not really hold value unless it is a marriage with God, right? Am I misinterpreting that, or is that like okay?
No, yeah, it is in our perspective. It's a
matrimony between like two souls under the umbrella of God.
Exactly. Right.
So
spiritually, we are said to become one.
Right. Exactly.
And if we look at like just our bodies themselves as like a temple, right, to house the spirit, to become influenced by, to move and to like create opportunity and change for those around us. Not only is it important how we treat our own bodies, but it becomes important for each other because we are ultimately moving together towards whatever path unfolds in front of us. So yes, absolutely. We require time and solitude to seek out, let's say, the voice of the Holy Spirit and calm ourselves down to have, you know, civil relationships where we are not torn by the flesh to like tear each other apart, but understand always that our job is to build those around us.
Did you grow up religious or did you find God?
I wouldn't say religious. I wouldn't even say that I'm very like religious now. I'm sure everybody would have their own opinion on like that. Sure. But I grew up, of course, with the name Christian, so I felt always called back to that.
I was going to be named Christian too.
Yeah, I was really named Jeremiah.
I believe so. It was between Christian and Alexander.
And then your dad was like, I don't like either.
My dad was like Sanders. So we settled on Sander with full legal name being Alexander.
Do you know why your parents changed from Jeremiah to Christian?
They didn't want people singing Jeremiah was a bullfrog at me.
What is that?
Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
I don't know that
was
song.
A good friend of mine.
I know that song.
I don't understand a word he said, but we always had a really good time.
Dude, that sounds, Jeremiah's the bullfrog sounds awesome. What are you talking about?
So we landed on Christian and yeah. But to get back to the point, I grew up, I say, in a family where my mother and father met in a church. My mom was playing piano, I believe. My dad was sitting in the pews. He was visiting churches, and he saw my mom playing piano, and he was like, wow. He bumped his shoulders with what would be his best man, and he said, I'm going to marry that girl one day. And he did. That said, they always like had me going into Sunday school at a young age, but we didn't attend church every Sunday. I did go to a small Christian school of like Baptist influence in my rural hometown. From kindergarten to fourth grade. And I think, you know, getting an education out of there to begin with, small classrooms and understanding like the Bible stories kind of helped to influence my ontology, right? My like foundational framework of how I get to view the universe. But then as I grew up, I started going to public schools, and life got busy. I started doing sports. We didn't do church every Sunday. By the time I would say I was 14 years old, found YouTube, and I found like Western philosophy, and I started questioning things. And I heard Richard Feynman and these like great scientific communicators explain how you should search for empirical evidence of everything around you. And I believed that, and I started questioning, and I had this period of time that was so very stressful. I would say at about 14 years old, I had a coming out to my parents in the living room. I'm agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, do you understand what this means? Like, I don't necessarily like not believe there's a God. I'm not an atheist, but I don't necessarily believe that there is a God, And I just told them that. I was like, I'm agnostic. And I cried, and they cried, and they said they'd pray for me. And then I just moved on through life by my own accord at that point. But I always still had this daily conversation with God, whether or not I knew exactly what he meant to me. And I'd say that prayer, that practice of just the way that I conduct my mindfulness is what ultimately led me back through just being open to study, whether that was studying other religions, especially while I was here at Florida Tech, or, having the courage to get back into the gospel and understand what exactly it was that Jesus was trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately I just, I had one of these coming to Jesus moments shortly around that time that I started to get in this relationship with my wife. And it was just this homecoming where everything made sense again. And I was at the most peace I'd had in a very long time. Because it was that window really between 14 and 23 that I experienced anxiousness and depression very deeply for extended periods of time every year, for 11 years. And I mean, thank God I don't experience that anymore.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that.
Thanks.
Do you know the Sean Ryan podcast? Are you familiar?
Yeah.
He has an episode. I believe it's his podcast. I'll find it for you. But I believe his podcast had a recent episode about looking for evidence of the afterlife through near-death experiences.
Right.
And documenting people's near-death experiences. Very interesting podcast. It's about 2.5 hours.
All right.
Something like that. It's well worth it. I mean, it's whether you believe or not believe or whatever, it's just interesting.
Right.
It's just very, very interesting to go through his, he's spent over a decade collecting evidence and talking to people from India, from, the Middle East, from Europe, America, South America. Right. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. And that it's the percentage of similarities between people of near-death experiences is sometimes higher than the correlation of people who see an accident, right? Like a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
The recollection of bystanders for that car crash will be less predictable than it is for people who have gone through near-death experiences, which is that's a very broad overview of the general consensus he tries to bring. But it's very interesting. He started off as a physicist that was atheist, going on this journey to try and disprove God to prove his point, and he ended up completely reversing his opinion. Yeah. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I know to each their own, but I personally would recommend it to anyone who's just curious about that sort of thing.
Send it to both of us.
Yes, I'll send it in the group chat. But
right on.
It's interesting that you mentioned an agnostic coming out to your family and their reaction to it. I had a similar experience, but from the opposing end, because both of my parents were STEM majors in college. Right. My dad's an engineer for NASA. My dad has always been more open-minded than my mother, but my mother is who gave me most of my critical thinking skills growing up. I spent more time with her. And a lot of it was follow the scientific method. And if there's not evidence for something, then, there's no proof, right, without evidence. And so when I got into my high school years, I started to have the deep questions about, well, there are questions in science that don't have answers yet. And how am I to know that there's a scientific solution to that when there could also easily be a religious solution, because there's no evidence one way or the other? So I had a similar talk with my parents, really more questioning, why are you so quick to embrace atheism, which is the denial of anything? It's a denial of a potential solution. And so I came out more so as agnostic, because I felt that, how am I to judge what an answer to a question should be if I don't know what the options are?
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting moment as well. My mom doesn't understand it still to this day, but I think my dad has. We've had a lot of conversations about it. And I find that it's a more open way of living life. But I've never gotten to the point where I've gone to church religiously or studied. I've been several times, especially in hard times where I need answers. And I find that even if I don't fully believe, I can still find really great value in a lot of the lessons from the Bible. But I've never gone into heavy prayer or understood how to do that. But you mentioned that in your conversations with God is how you practice mindfulness. Can you walk me through how you do that and how that works?
Right. So at a young age, I was taught that, or before I'd say how I was taught, I would say that most people think that of prayer as this very serious, like, communion, right? You think of clasped hands, you think of somebody being on their knees, possibly. In movies, you see people like walk into an empty church, having just gone through this terrible experience.
Right.
Getting down on the ground as the sun shines through the stained glass. And, I came up from a pretty rural area. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad installed tile. My grandmother was born in 1935.
Wow.
And very much influenced by the Great Depression. And she's this kind of hermit little lady. She's still kicking it right now at about 90 years old.
So she's a World War II survivor.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
She, so just from this experience.
My mom was born in 1944.
So she was too.
Sort of. Yeah.
But in the USSR, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's even rougher, I would say. Your family's from the United States, I take it?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's okay. We would say the blessing before dinner, and that would be the one habitual thing that gets thrown in as far as religious goes, right? Mm-hmm. Just having a system for returning to the process, right? I was taught that anytime, any place, you could say anything to God. Anytime, any place. You wake up, you say good morning, right? You stub your toe, you say what you will. But at any time, at any place, he's your friend, and he's part of you, and he's in you, and you're in him, and he's your creator, and nobody knows you any better. So it's important, to understand that and say, let's have this conversation. It'll help you in your relationship with the scripture, if you will, but it'll also help you in a relationship with yourself, because you are able to think sort of dualistically, right? You don't have to feel like you're in this rumination cycle, but you can feel as if you're in conversation. And then it also encourages you to look for opportunities of where in life God might be answering you. And I think it helps you to be a little more decisive and careful. But yeah, it's relaxed, I would say, conversation with God. It's anytime, any place.
Leading up to recording the podcast, we've had a couple conversations about what you've been emphasizing lately in your life. And one of the key components we discussed was a sense of presence and how to be present in a moment. I can imagine that any time that you engage in prayer, even if it's passing, that is a moment that you take to be present, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It absolutely is. That's, I would say, the purpose of it is to engage. And I probably say the word engage 5 times a day, because it really is the most important thing in life. Whatever you're doing, you want to be engaged with it.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately the most present you can be, whether it's by phenomenology, you're lying on your back in the park and you're staring up at the branches above you and the squirrels jumping from branch to branch and the clouds behind them moving, and you're just experiencing like, wow, all of these photons that are, from the sky and the trees and the squirrels, it's touching them, and then it's touching the back of my retina, and I'm like fully aware that I'm a part of this experience, that it's all just one thing. So yeah, the prayer is absolutely the big part of being present. It's, I would say, a dress rehearsal for those moments where, God calls us to live engaged.
Listening to you talk about photons hitting your retina and processing it and being a part of the world that you're in right now is really interesting. Everybody listening can use the same process just listening through headphones with the radio waves hitting your ears. Recently, I've listened to a lot of Paul Rosalie, who is an environmentalist he lived in the United States. He grew up until he was 18, and he moved to the Amazon rainforest. And he's lived there since, and he started a preservation effort. They buy huge chunks of land from loggers before they cut it down, and then they employ the loggers as park rangers to take care of that and make sure that no loggers, come on their land, no poachers, anything. But he speaks about living in the rainforest versus living in the United States. And he speaks a lot about presence. There's not distractions like we take for granted every day, like phones and traffic and lights and AC units and stuff. There's always something going on in the background. And he says that it can be deadly quiet, or it can be the noise of the jungle. But in all instances, you're very present. And he speaks about being a part of the environment because you are sweating constantly, right? Because it's hot there. And so you go to the river and you take a drink of water, and then later on, later in the evening, you can see the steam evaporating off of your arm and going up into the clouds. And then that afternoon, when it rains, that water falls back down into the same river, and you feel more a part of the ecosystem. I really want to experience that because I don't feel that in our day-to-day life. I have felt significant presence before, but it's not daily that I get it. What's the earliest that you can remember being like truly present in a moment?
There are a couple of like flashbulb memories that I have of childhood. One of them, I can't tell if it was real or not. I remember my parents disputing it to me. But I kind of remember being on this play mat with like these dangly things above me. But that could have been from a Rugrats episode that my mind misremembered, right?
Yeah.
I do remember being on a swing in my backyard, and the frayed yellow rope, and sitting on this blue plastic swing, and maybe somebody pushing me. But I remember the frayedness and thinking like, wow, this isn't perfect, but I love it. And I remember racing my dad along the fence line in our backyard. And I was like, wow, he's so fast. I remember this one time we had this little spiral slide in my backyard, and I got a dock line from my dad's boat. And I remember casting it up on top of the slide, climbing up there, tied it off, and then I tied it around my waist, and I remember rappelling up it like some Spy Kids movie or something that I'd been inspired by, and falling and getting the wind knocked out of me. Those I remember being very just calm moments. But I was also, again, in that rural area where I had the opportunity to go out and play in the woods a lot.
Yeah.
And I think by doing that, and I spent a lot of time as a kid climbing trees. I think the great thing about climbing trees as a kid is that it teaches you to be careful and to be engaged. Because you are through this process of moving course, and you have to test things and understand how strong they are. And then you have to have faith that it's going to hold you after you've done as much testing as you can. And you also get to be creative and try new ways to climb the same tree. You also have to remember how you got there in the first place. Understand, is this a one-way door or a two-way door?
Can I get back down?
Exactly. And there were many times when I was terrified and stuck up in that tree thinking, oh my gosh, how the heck did I get myself into this situation? But then you take that moment and you're like, oh my God, all right, I'm up here for a little while. I don't have the courage to get down right now, but I'm just going to sit here and observe the woods around me. So there were just days and days and days of that kind of stillness in the woods where you're watching the squirrels and the birds and listening to the wind and the cars in the distance and the Spanish moss and the ants crawling by you. I actually took a break from work yesterday and decided to go climb up a tree for the first time in like a year. And I sat up in a tree and listened to a podcast for 40 minutes.
What kind of podcasts do you like?
All sorts.
Apart from the Vision 79 podcast.
I do listen to my share of Joe Rogan.
It's funny. I was about to say you seem like a Joe Rogan kind of guy.
Yeah.
Which I am too. I don't mean that as a negative thing. I love Joe Rogan.
He's very kind.
Yeah. I love the way he presents himself. I love the way he carries his guests through the podcast in a way that doesn't feel like an interview. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Actually, I think that you mentioned, maybe it's not Joe Rogan specifically, but I read your website where you talk about your experience with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Did Joe Rogan have any part in inspiring that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I could listen to the way that he spoke about it, his guests spoke about it, and I just wanted to experience doing something for the first time again.
Yeah.
Coming off the tail end of trying triathlon.
Trying triathlon. That's bold. That's bold. That's like trying sushi, the way you mentioned it, but that's a big commitment.
It was, but I think trying things that will undoubtedly humble you is a way to get back to that presence of being a kid in a tree. You know, when I had to try triathlon, I just was interested in something that I could learn again for the first time, because rowing was so hard and fun to learn to begin with.
Yeah.
And
to begin with.
And
then it just got hard.
The triathlon, the swimming, man, I remember drinking half the pool when I started. And then when you get into jiu-jitsu, I remember being paired up with like 400-pound dudes. And here I am, like 210 wet. And I'm trying to understand how I could possibly move this guy's body off of me. And, you know, every time you're going in, it's like, okay, they're either trying to manipulate my joint to break it or choke me unconscious. And it's just a very humbling experience.
Did Zap does triathlons, right?
Yeah, he's into them now.
Was he into it before you? Did he get you to get into it, or did you get him?
He was still rowing when I got into it.
Got it. So you were the trendsetter.
I won't take credit.
Yeah.
I know Jackson got into it too, and he's so fast.
Jackson seems to be fast at whatever he does.
Yeah. And he just keeps getting faster. I swear he's going to be like an ultra marathoner.
Really?
At like 50 years old that just smokes the field.
Wow.
Have you ever shot a bow and arrow?
No, but I'd love to.
That is a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of bow did you shoot?
Compound bow.
Yeah. I've never shot a compound bow. I've done recurve, and those are impossible.
Yeah, like I chose the easy route with the compound bow. But, you know, nevertheless, it is a very humbling experience. Mm-hmm. Like when you go into it, you're like, oh, I got this. Like I see videos online of like people shooting an arrow and then shooting the arrow through the other arrow and then it splits the first arrow, right? Like, oh yeah, like I could at least get it on the board. Yeah. And it's like, holy shit. Like, you know, I suck at this, and B, like, the reason I mentioned the bow and arrow is because there's like a particular like presence that you have to acquire in order to be able to like actually hit your target. It's not just like, oh, aim, like what's the angle that you're at. It's like a whole incorporation between like how you're breathing, how you're looking, like how you're positioned, like your muscle movements, how relaxed or tense are you, right? And so it's a very like humbling experience to shoot a bow and arrow. It's not like I've shot pistols quite a while ago as well. It's very different. It's very different. I think that probably shooting a bow and arrow would be similar to like a sniper trying to snipe something down like a long range. Yeah. Right. It's like a very like in-tuned experience. But I think you'd like it. That's my next for maybe a date recommendation for you and your wife. I guess.
Paul Rosalie in the Amazon talks about the uncontacted tribes because they've got bow and arrows, and they shoot 7-foot long bamboo spears out of bow and arrows. And they can, I remember he cited a meter number. It was like 130 something meters, which is, I mean, from rowing, that's not a short distance.
Joe Rogan is relatively good, and he said he shot 55 or 60 at his most for a wild animal, which is also ridiculously long, like 180 feet, 200 feet.
Oh, yeah. Like, that's crazy long.
Crazy.
Which is why these uncontacted tribes, I mean, they know the jungle better than anything that has ever lived there.
Yeah.
And they say that there's so many stories of like loggers or tourists coming in and then being contacted by the uncontacted tribes, and they just fuck them up every single time. It's terrifying. They speak to each other in their native language, but they'll also communicate to each other in Capuchin monkey language. Wow. So they talk to each other in monkey so that you don't know that they're there, and they know that you don't know they're there because they sound like monkeys, and we don't speak monkey. That's incredible. That's terrifying. Yeah.
I heard this story about this guy camping out in, I think it was the Amazon, but he was like, I was camping out in the Amazon and I started hearing like weird animal noises that like sounded really close to animal noises, but not quite.
Yeah.
And they kept getting closer and closer. And he was like, I'm just leaving. Like, screw this. And then later on, he researched it and found out something similar. There was a tribe like that in the area that he was in.
Yep.
So crazy.
That's terrifying. That's something that I have always wanted to experience, but don't want to experience,
Yeah.
I think it would be I'd love to see a documentary on it, but maybe not be there in person. I think I'd have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Talk about being present, right? In that moment, you're shitting bricks.
Yeah. So I guess I'll tell a personal anecdote to get into my next question, but I grew up in a very busy city. I grew up in Boston.
Okay.
And I think there were very few moments. I was trying to recall moments that I felt like I was present in my childhood, and there were very few. Like, I think that like the moments that I probably felt most present were either in a go-kart or like in the forest at my grandparents' house in Vermont, or like in a car ride with my mom on the way to a race. Like, there were very few though. And I have this like tearing association between like, I feel as though sometimes when I'm too present, I'm not aiming towards like the productivity goals or the things I want out of life. Like, I'm taking time away from being productive in order to like better myself is how I like see it inherently. Not inherently. I have two different views, but I also see the value in being able to just like stop and like really sit in the moment and be thankful for what you have right now and really just like take that in. And I think that there were a few times in my younger childhood where I felt present, but I think what really kind of shook me a little bit and kind of forced me to become present was I got into a really bad car wreck like six months ago. Yeah, about 6 months ago. And after that, I was like, I walked out of the accident. Okay. I had like a busted nose and 2 sprained wrists, and I was like a little bit shook up, but like really not that bad in retrospect of things. And the other person involved came away with a broken hip, a broken arm, head trauma in the ICU, like a bunch of just terrible stuff on their end. And so after the accident, I went back home, and I was like, what do I do now? Like, I guess I can like call my insurance company and like stuff like that. Well, I was like, what's like the right thing to do? And I was like, I feel like I should go visit the other person that was involved in the accident. And at that time, the accident was claimed as 100% my fault, although later on in court, it was claimed to be mutual fault. But it was 100% my fault at the scene. So I was going into a hospital situation where the other person involved and their family assumed that I was 100% at fault. So I was like, this is like, I would take any day over that day. Like, I don't want to go in that room. Right. But I was like, what is the thing? Are you pulling up pictures?
Yeah, this is the car. This is Sanders' car.
Wow.
After the accident.
She pulled out across 2 lanes of traffic. Oncoming traffic. But I decided to like go to Publix and like get a card And there was like a few moments of presence that I had. One of them was like I was standing in front of the cards and I was like trying to think about what I should get. And there were like some with like may God be with you, like I hope you feel better. There was like a lot of like Christian themed cards. And then there were a lot that were like just hope you feel better. And it was like a moment of like what do I give to this person? Like I don't know them at all. I don't even like know their name outside of like from like the receipt that the cop printed me out. Yeah. You know, it's like I don't know what to get them, and it's like I don't want to be like may God be with you, but then they're atheist, and then I don't know like what to do. I ended up getting something that would kind of blended the two themes together. I found something that was right.
Was it that poster of the cat that says just hang in there?
It was not. It was not. I think that might have been a slightly too comedic for my intent. But I went
Better luck next time.
Yeah. I went to the hospital and I delivered the flowers in the card. And it was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to go. I thought they were just going to rip me apart in there. And I was fully prepared for that. I was like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, it's okay. It's like the worst it's going to be is like 5 minutes. And I remember then walking out, you know, I gave her the flowers and like I got her like a little stuffed animal bear and a card. And I walked out of the hospital, got back in my car, and it was like a real moment of just like complete decompression. And I remember driving around, and I worked with you on the laptop stuff that night a little bit, and kind of like did a couple small things. I hadn't picked up a wrist brace yet, so I went to Walgreens to get a wrist brace on my way home. And I did go to the hospital that evening and get checked out, but it doesn't matter. But anyways, I was on my way home, and like I hadn't like cried or been upset about the accident at all at that point. Like I was just like, you know what, like it is what it is. It's cool. Like, you know, it'll all gloss over. It'll all be okay. And like in the car, I got the wrist brace from Walgreens, and I was really like just quiet. Like, you know, the music wasn't like really like hitting me in the same way. And like I tried listening to a podcast, and that wasn't soaking in. And anyway, it was just kind of like dead space. And I was making like the final corner to my street, and my Miata has no power steering, so it's really hard to turn the wheel. And I remember like as I'm trying to get into the driveway, I just start bawling. Like I just can't take it. And it's like so upsetting, like this situation I'm in. And like I have all this weight because like someone else was involved that was really injured and is in the ICU right now, where I get to drive home in my second vehicle and like live my life essentially normally, besides like a couple small pains here and there. And I just start bawling. And I remember like trying to turn the wheel, and I cannot fucking turn the wheel. As hard as I am, like I'm trying to turn this fucking wheel, and I'm so upset, and I'm like so torn up by this situation. I'm like sitting there, and I remember I finally got it. Actually, my girlfriend at the time helped me pull the wheel. She was with me in the car, and she helped me pull the wheel so that I could just get the car in the driveway. And I remember like just like laying down in bed. I didn't sleep almost at all that night, like maybe half an hour. And I remember waking up the next day and just like really trying, like actively trying to be present in the moment that I had, to be thankful to like be in my own space for another day and be able to like go and, you know, to the kava bar and like hang out with my friends. So it was like, I think after that experience, I was really able to become a little bit more present. But, you know, to weave back to where this story started, there's still that part of me that's like, I have a super hard time just sitting down and being present. Yeah. And so how do you find, or do you try to find a balance in your life between having presence for the moments that you have versus, you know, chasing after the dreams or goals that you have, whether it's a triathlon, or I know that you also have a podcast, right? How do you find a balance from there? Or do you utilize God as like a guide to figure that out? Or like, how do you work that?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The dichotomy between being productive and being present. There's two ways that I kind of want to go into this, and then I'll get into how I get into it personally.
Sure.
My first thought was that I heard this as a quote from somebody who quoted somebody. If we're scared to lose an hour, or if we're scared to like waste an hour of our lives, we should probably be more scared of wasting 10 years of our lives.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
You told me this, or I heard about this. My freshman year of college, Elena was a new coxswain on the men's rowing team. And she was struggling to decide what major she wanted to be because she wasn't sure if she wanted to shift or not. And you told her about your experience because you had picked a major before,
right?
Philosophy. What were you before?
Business.
And you had a critical moment after your freshman year where you thought, I don't know if this is what I want to do. And if I change, then I've wasted the last year of my life. But your decision was, I can either change tracks and go down a path where I'd be happy and accept that I've wasted a year of my life, or I can stay on this path and waste the rest of my life. And that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to interrupt with that.
Okay.
Because I heard that from you 6 years ago, and it stays with me.
Yeah. I remember giving that advice probably to a couple people a couple times. And it was given to me, at first. And we're all just standing on the shoulders of giants.
You're my giant, buddy.
Oh, thank you. You're my capuchin.
Got me right as I took a sip.
So there is this tension, right, that exists with all of us of how do we know when to go? How do we know when to slow? Smooth is fast, right? No, slow is smooth is fast. Yeah. Take your time, make this moment last. Whatever we are doing, we want to make sure that we have clarity in what we're doing and that we don't feel like we're spinning our wheels, because ultimately being productive means that we're not spinning our wheels, right? That each time the tire rotates, right, where it has traction. Terrible for me to give a metaphor to people who really know what's going on with tires in the ground, but
no, we appreciate it.
Anyway, we are trying to just have traction any given moment, right? And if that traction means that our bank account grows, or the foundational systems of the business grows, or more people have subscribed, or the IRA is looking better, your S&P 500 is growing, whatever it is, we think of all these things as productive. When at the end of the day, when you were sick from that moment, all you wanted was for that other person to be well, right? That's all you wanted. And maybe for your wrist to stop hurting so much. But ultimately, that health is our biggest source of wealth. So whatever it is that we're doing, we're always going to want that first. And that's important to understand. And then to share it with people that we love. And then from there, we can just try our best to be present in whatever it is that we're also being productive in. Because I'm by no means an expert at it. I just have made it a priority in my life recently, right? I started reading this book again called Essentialism by a guy named Greg McKeown. And he talks about just doing less and better, or less and more meaningful, right? So really, my recent life has not been about doing more better, but it's about doing less and doing about more of what is essential to me. And what is essential to me, quite frankly, in the moment is, making money to pay the bills and spending time with family and friends and being present in those times where I'm not totally exhausted, and also making time for myself to spend with God in solitude, and spending time to play, right? To go for a run, to go lift weights, to go have the chance to climb a tree and read a book at leisure. So I think I've gone a little less from this idea of everybody needs to build their empire to what is your empire and what do you want your empire to be, even with the world's empire that you might build out of it, right? So once we prioritize those things, if we prioritize, our friends, our family, and our honesty with ourselves about where our priorities really are, those will move with us as we build our own, empire of productivity. But if those things aren't on the pedestal to us right now, it's going to be much harder to put them back on the pedestal once we've built out everything else. So I feel like I've had to take a couple steps back in my life as far as like my creative output in order to build my foundation as a husband and a future father, God willing, in order to, not chase the prestige that I once may have chased, but just to be the best that I can for those around me.
You mentioned earlier that before you found your wife, you were trying to focus on yourself and build yourself into a great husband and a great man.
Right.
Right. And then your girlfriend or friend at the time came along to be your wife and kind of, for lack of better words, kind of threw a wrench in that plan in some ways. Maybe is at least how I read it. Maybe you're wrong, maybe I'm wrong in that sense, but kind of like threw another factor in at least that was like, oh wait, like now I'm kind of having to figure out how to build it with someone else, right? Did you ever feel as though like, why now, God? Like, why bring this? I assume that you believe that like God brought you together, at least to some extent, right? So was there ever like a question of like, why God now? Like, I'm trying to focus on becoming the best person I can be so that I'm ready for a wife. Do you think that like, did you ever like question like, why now? Or did you ever feel like maybe there was some inherent value to building it with someone else that maybe you didn't see at the time that then God helped you see?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. Why God now? That was a question I had then, and that's a question I have every day about like every new thing that comes to life.
Fair enough.
Right. And that's
I felt very similarly with my accident, because at that point in time, like I was already stressed out about other stuff and I had IRS issues and whatever else. So it was like, then the crash happened and then I ran over both my laptops by mistake, my own fault, and just like other odds and ends shit. And I had a lot of like, man, like, why am I getting so screwed right now? Like, what is the learning experience from it? But coming back from it, I was like, that really taught me a lot about like A, the value of life, and like B, how to persevere through adversity. That's one of our kind of quotes, sort of. But it's, I guess I kind of interrupted your spiel and now I feel bad, but it's interesting, I guess, how as you're going through life, you have a plan, and then we have a saying in Russia where it's, you tell God your plans and he laughs in your face. And it's like, it's so interesting how life evolves and you can plan and plan and plan, but if you're not open to like at least seeing where life could potentially carry you, you might get trapped in a space that you don't even foresee being trapped in.
Absolutely. That's an English saying too. It's if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I grew up with Russian moms.
Yeah. It's the same phrase. Maybe it was
yeah.
There's that other one from
in communist Russia. It was our
the last decade that everyone can get on board with is life's what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
I feel like I've said that a lot.
It's interesting that you mention that the times that you can remember being most present are like all, not really a mental breakdown, but like
in times of pain.
Yeah, like decompression after something really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I think of my earliest memories of being present, I don't think they're particularly special. Like from when I was a kid, you wouldn't remember a memory from when you were 4 years old if it wasn't important in some sense or fashion.
I only have one memory from when I was 4 years old, and it was also an accident.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Like I had a bicycle crash.
Yeah.
It was like these concrete stairs that would drop in Boston. They have a lot of like basement apartments, and there were concrete stairs that dropped down off of the sidewalk. And I was riding my bike and I fell into one of those on my bike and toppled down.
One of my earliest ones,
which explains why I'm so smart.
First, trying to pull a wagon up the stairs behind me at my grandparents' house, and they had one of those automatic chairs, and the rail that chair follows had teeth on it for the gears, and I dragged my whole skull across those gears when I fell down the stairs. That's one of my earliest memories. So my earliest ones are from
head open,
from pain. It makes sense. And then my more recent visceral memories are of pain as well. So I would say that there's probably an 80-20 split. Most of the ones that I can recall, I'm more present in times of suffering. Have you experienced the same thing?
Yes. So to be present in times of pain or loss, I think to open this back up with a really good quote by this guy named Ray Dalio. Have you heard of him?
I've heard of him, but I don't know.
Started, I believe he started Bridgewater hedge fund.
Okay.
He's written a couple books now. Principles for Life is one of them, where this came from, and then another one's Principles for the Dealing with the Changing World Order. Both great. One of them includes this quote, which is an equation: discomfort plus reflection equals growth. Discomfort plus reflection equals growth. And I think that's very valuable. So when you come to a time of pain and loss, you can think of your future trajectories of how you handle them. If you allow yourself to be present in that, you're probably going to grow from it, and you're going to realize that this is shaping your character, really. And I think of a verse of Romans 5, suffering endured produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. Okay. So in order to have hope for your future, right, you must build character that you know how to operate in those times of discomfort, loss, pain, right? And that's derived from your experience of persevering suffering before, of being engaged with it rather than numbing it, rather than distractions, rather than coping. But to engage with it, you build that perseverance that produces character and character hope. It's also said, I believe in Proverbs of King Solomon. Now, it could have been Ecclesiastes. Either way, King Solomon says that. Do you know about King Solomon?
I don't.
I feel like I've heard the story, but I couldn't recall.
Okay. King Solomon is, of the Bible, kind of like Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
So Marcus Aurelius. So he was this stoic philosopher king in Greece, in Rome.
It was in Rome.
In Rome.
Alex Hormozy's character that he writes to himself is called Solomon.
Oh, yeah. Reason. Well, I'm familiar with the Alex Hormozy character.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Solomon was a king that was known to be the richest of all kings ever. And he had delved into every pleasure there was to delve into, and he had explored purpose in every facet of life. He has a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes, where he starts saying, like, life is pointless. Everything is pointless, and goes through why everything is pointless. And then by the end, it's like, this is why I have hope in God. But I believe in Proverbs, he talks about how it is better to be in a house of mourning than in a house of celebration. And if you want to look at this through that lens of productivity, as we are young, ambitious men, to experience that house of mourning. And I don't know how recently you guys have been in a true house of mourning, but I was at a celebration of life last month, and it is so powerful to be present in that space and to have all these emotions wash over you, having lost somebody, and to be reminded of how precious life is. That if you can be present in times like that, it will shape you into the man that you want to become, I believe.
What's the hardest thing you've been through? Alex Hormozy has this really great saying. It might not be his, but it's the hardest thing that you've ever been through is the hardest thing that you've ever been through. So if you grew up wealthy and the worst thing that's happened is you forgot your golf clubs at home when you got to the course and had to drive back ashamed, that's still valid, because that's still the worst thing that's happened to you. If you grew up impoverished and once went without food for 3 weeks, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. and it's credible for both people.
I think the accident really changed my perspective on that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it was like,
must be close
that was
to
terrible. And then the laptop situation and the IRS situation and then the lawsuit, and it was like, oh my God, it was like, this really sucks. And it was like, if I could smile through that, it was like, it's all good. You know what I mean?
You feel you handled that well, and you grew through it?
I think overall,
good.
Yeah. I mean, I think I could have handled it a lot worse. Like, I still got up every day and, you know, did what I had to do. I still communicated politely with the people around me. I was still not like happy all the time, but like I tried to crack a joke here and there.
Good.
And I think that I've come back from that better than I was. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not passing
You
judgment.
don't have to.
Well, no, I'm not. I would agree with you, but I'm not passing judgment. I'm more so asking for your own analysis of how you felt.
No, I think I've become a better person after that experience, I would say.
And you, with your worst experience? You don't have to get into details if you don't want to, but...
all in all, I've had a pretty good life. I think my mind and I would say like spirit has been where most of the warfare has taken place. So I would say like the hardest thing has just been times, not recently, thank God, but years ago when I was deciding whether or not to like turn my truck off the side of the road. And just thinking, like making that battle, you know, is all of this worth it? I think those decisive moments, you know, they really made me who I am too.
Did you not have hope in those moments that life could get as well as it is for you today?
No, I didn't see it coming.
If you were dropped in the passenger seat of that truck with that age Christian today, what would you tell him?
Nothing. Not a thing.
Why?
He wouldn't listen. No, he wouldn't listen. He'd call my bluff, whatever he could do. He wouldn't know. He just needed to get through himself. He had to experience the pain of uncertainty, and he had to take steps of faith into the future.
I think that's something I've seen in you before. There was one morning practice where we were sitting in the launch. You may have been coaching that day. You may have been driving the launch. But you told me a story of how you came across this homeless man and he was asking for money. And you were like, I'm not just going to give you straight up money. Can I buy you food? He was like, I don't want food, man. Like, I just need money. I'm trying to start like a car washing business. And you were like, well, what supplies do you need for the car washing business? Like, I'll go get you stuff to help you out. And so you went shopping with him and you got him a bucket and a sponge and soap and showed him where a hose was and said that you would send people his way. And you parted ways and then you ran into him. It might have been the year after that. And he was in the same position with no cleaning supplies. And you said, hey, man, like, how is your cleaning business going? And he shrugged you off and he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you were like, no, like, we had a whole day. Like, when I got you supplies, like, you know, I tried to help you. Like, what's going on? He was like, stop talking to me, man. And I feel like most people in the middle class or upper middle class would be quick to call you an idiot for helping him because they see those people as hopeless. They're there for a reason. They'll just take advantage of you or waste your time. And maybe those people are right in some instances, but they aren't always. But I've always held an immense amount of respect for you for taking your time and money to give him a chance anyways.
Yeah.
And it would have been really easy to just keep walking that day and not go through that lesson hard. Like, if future Christian went back and said, hey, man, he's going to waste your time and money, I still think that he would have gone and done that anyways. Similar to this truck situation.
Yeah, you gotta take the chance. And man, I had so much free time in college. It was awesome. that was one thing, right? You know, I didn't have many appointments to attend to. You know, I had my classes, and then I'd have to read a couple hundred pages a day.
Right.
I remember that vividly. I remember meeting him out in front of Clemente, or a gym on campus, and I remember him, you know, asking for money, saying, hey, somebody stole my like tire shining equipment over at the 7-Eleven or what was there. And I remember meeting him at the Dollar General a half hour later. I told him I'd meet him there, and I met him with an old backpack I had with a couple of changes of clothes, some flip-flops, a towel. I remember I had a New Testament, a little New Testament book, and a journal that I gave him with some pens and some water and food, and yada yada. So I had him.
That's a great starter kit.
I set him up with the starter kit. I'm like, hey, if you need to like just look presentable, here's your clothes and yada yada. I encouraged him to write, to journal. I encourage everybody to journal. And then I went into this Dollar General where he said he was banned from on University Boulevard. And that was an experience in itself.
That's tough to get banned from that Dollar General.
Yeah. I went in there. I got him some tire shine equipment. I told him about what self-car wash I'd recommend him set up at. And I went back and I went to his tent city and I saw his tent and I saw what had gripped him. I saw all the bottles laying around. And at that point, I knew, this guy was in a battle with addiction. And that really is the poor circumstance of us as human beings, is that we're so prone to it, whatever it is. Some people are drawn to the bottle and some people other things. But for him to not have that clarity, from his circumstances, from everything up to this point that had produced his character, it was a gamble to do anything for him. But I just wanted to be some hope, right? And sometimes very simple acts can spur very profound changes in somebody's life. He could have been told no hundreds of times before me, and then somebody just actually engages with him in a human way, possibly for the first time in years. That could have had a change. It didn't. And it's possible he was drunk, so it just wasn't, it didn't line up. But that's why I have faith that other people do help their neighbors as well. That was an experience. I did see him later twice, actually. The first time, I remember going back to Iron Oaks looking for my debit card. And I sat down at the bar, and somebody next to me, it's like, hey, can you give me the money? Hey, and I said his name as he told me it was that day. And he's like, oh, no, that's not my name. Oh, no, that's not me. And I'm like, yeah, you remember we had that day?
Yeah.
And he denied it. And then about a year later was when I saw him out by Backwater asking how much money I would give him for 50 push-ups.
Interesting.
Right? So some people just need to understand how you gain economic value is by giving some sort of value to somebody else, right? Not everybody is going to think that it's entertaining for you to
do 100 push-ups.
Do 100 push-ups.
Right.
Right. So yeah, there's plenty of things to learn from that experience.
After you told me that story, I recall leaving practice and being really aware that it would be super easy to think less of you for succumbing to essentially making a fool out of yourself from this guy. But I remember being very aware that I didn't feel that way. And a lot of people who I grew up with would be quick to think that way. And I was in tune with the fact that I didn't feel that way. And that felt off to me because I would expect myself to think less of you for it from the way that I grew up. But I didn't. And I contemplated on that. I mean, for years since then. I'm thinking about it today. But specifically, the next day, I had a friend from high school reach out to me because they had just started going to Florida Tech. And they were like, hey, we're in this class together. I know that we have never been super close, but I just want to let you know that like one time in high school, I was having a really bad day and I came close to committing suicide. And I was messaging everybody in my Snapchat who would respond, and no one ever responded to me. You're the only person who texted me back. You sent 3 lines of text to me, and that was it. But that was the only touch of positivity in my life that stopped me from committing that day.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to thank you. And so then we started sitting together in class and, we became friends for a little while. But I thought to myself, man, if something as major as committing a full day and money and supplies to helping someone who might need it and something as minor as sending 3 lines of text to somebody who you don't even really know that well, either one of those have a huge impact on those people. And it's worth taking that chance, because having that type of positive impact on somebody really meant a lot to me in that moment. And it meant a lot to me even to see you go through that effort, even when it wasn't reciprocated. So that stuck with me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
You sharing that.
A huge part of our journey and a big motivating factor for me is to give back to my community. The first opportunity that I was really given was when I graduated college to coach at Space Coast Crew. And I really wanted to do it. I love that team. I attribute a lot of the values that I have today to rowing in its entirety, but specifically to Space Coast Crew. And I really wanted to start coaching, but I knew that Sandra and I wanted to start a business, and I wouldn't have time to work a full job, start a business, and coach. So ultimately I turned them down, but I was an active alumni. And earlier in the podcast, you mentioned that it's not wise to give up friends and family and the sense of being present to pursue an empire and then try to put it back on the pedestal later in life. And up till in the last maybe year or so, I've thought, well, charity is something for rich people to do because they have the time and money to give. And when I turned down the coaching position full time, I felt terrible about it, not because I felt like I wasn't doing the right thing, but I felt like there's something that I can do and I'm choosing not to, because I do have that time. I'm choosing to spend that time elsewhere. And that really hurt. And I realized that charity isn't something that you like have to delay till when you have all this time and money to give. It can be scaled to where you are. And so recently, I've spoken about this on the podcast before, but I'm really excited about it because of the people that I'm helping. But I took a position on the board of advisors for Space Coast Crew as an alumni advisor. So I sit in on board meetings and I help guide their decision, because all these parents have no rowing experience. They're only here for 2 or 3 years. The information transfer is terrible. But it's a way for me to give 3 hours a month and help out. And I've also started donating to Paul Rosalie's Jungle Keepers conservation effort in the Amazon, $5 a month, because I can afford both of those things. And as I gain wealth and get more of my time back from business, I'm able to grow those things and scale those things accordingly. So if I'm a billionaire, I can give hundreds of millions of dollars away. Awesome. And I can spend all of my time with this conservation group. And it's not realistic to say that I should spend 4 hours of every day right now coaching, but I can give 3 hours a month. And I'd like to know what you do daily to scratch that itch for yourself, and if you agree with that perspective.
I do agree with that perspective. I believe that charity, in some sense, is a virtue, right? It's something that we should try to implement in our lives daily. And it doesn't just mean, people that are poor. It doesn't just mean people that are hungry. It doesn't just mean, those things. But I think my first charity, right? My first place is my home, right? I want to make sure that my wife is loved and provided for, and I want to make sure that my dog is loved and provided for, and then I want to make sure that my neighbors feel loved and provided for, and then I want to make sure that my coworkers feel like they are loved and provided for, that they know what they're doing with their business, and we can talk through things there. And then I want to make sure that some distant family feels loved and provided for. And then when things come up and we have the chance to have dinner with a widow that we know, right? Or help with some foster kids, like that sort of thing. It's like, okay, now let's prioritize some of those sort of things in our schedule. And I would say a lot of my charity nowadays is just
being someone to lean on.
Yeah, just having time for other people.
Yeah. There's a Alex Hormozy quote, which is you pay for lessons with either time or money, and you use the currency that you value least.
Yeah.
And I apply that to charity as well, because I have very little money to give. So I could easily not give $5 a month and claim that I just don't have the money for it. And that's perfectly fine. But I do have time, though I'm choosing to spend it elsewhere. So I'm going to elect to choose to spend some of it every month on that. And I feel that taking the time to give to people, as big or as small as having dinner or taking on a foster kid for several weeks or months, right, are all charitable. I think, Sandra, you sometimes struggle with giving time to people because it seems incessant. Like it seems a lot.
I don't know what that word means.
What do you mean? Incessant? Like nonstop. It's all the time. Like you can give 5 minutes to somebody because that doesn't seem like much. But if 35 people want 5 minutes from you, that's most of your day.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So how do you find a balance between that? Between giving the time to people and then saying no to them when you just can't balance that time?
It's tough because sometimes I feel like I try to give a finger and then they take an arm. You know what I mean? Like I had a neighbor that him and his girlfriend lived on the other side of this duplex next to me, and the guy needed like his AC looked at on his truck and an oil change and like just some like small things like that. And so I gave him like a really steep discount on, it was a few other things too. I can't remember all that I did. But
it's a belt tensioner or something.
Oh yeah, a belt and belt tensioner and idle pulley, so a few things. And so I gave him a really steep discount on it initially, and then I could see that he was struggling to pay it back. So once he paid me back for the cash for just the parts, I said, "Don't worry about the rest," because it took him like a month just to pay me back the parts. And after that, like every single time I stepped outside of the duplex, he was usually really polite about it and kind about it. But his girlfriend would be like, hey, could you like take a quick look at this thing, or like come over to my place and like be like, hey, like somebody told me blah, blah, blah. Like, could you look at this or look at that? And it's like, I'm relatively busy. Like I offer to do something, but like I can't be of constant availability to everyone around me. And so that is a real struggle for me, because when I turn people down, I feel inherently bad about it. Like when I say, hey, like, I just can't do this right now. I'm super busy. I'm stressed out about a bunch of stuff. I'm sorry. Right? That I feel bad about that. And I feel bad about it for like a solid hour until I like convince myself that it's okay. And I distract myself with another task. Or it's like yesterday we were working at Kraken, and like it was all great people around us, but there were so many different people that I wanted to have different conversations. Like I felt myself starting to get frustrated with the fact that like I was trying to do my own thing in my own space. And like I was clearly trying to do that, at least from my perspective, because I had my laptop open, headphones in, right, like looking at my screen, not conversing with people. But like still people come up and try to talk and whatever. And so I think what I usually try to do is like accept the fact that this is probably a good problem to have, because I could be in a position where everyone hates me and no one wants to talk to me, and then I'd just be sad, right? So it's like, first thing first, like be thankful that you have people around you that care about you and like, you know, value your presence in their life, right? That's great. The first thing. The second thing is I am in a space, like let's say I'm at Kraken or Pauhana. I'm in a space where those connections are easily fostered because I am in a public environment where other people go to converse with other people. So for me to come in and claim that everyone should, you know, just isolate from me because that's the mode I'm in, I think is a tall ask for an environment that's inherently communicative, right? So it's like if I am having an issue with people coming up to me, although I can address it politely, if it's continuing to happen and it's irritating me to the point where I can't work, I can move. Right? Like I can go home, I can go somewhere else, right? And I ended up going to Pauhana. It was much quieter. I sat outside at the front there. I actually smoked a cigar for the first time in a while, and I just like chilled, right? And it was very nice, it was very calm. I'm super glad I did. There was no one out there. You know, I just did my own thing. And that's what I like about that little front area of Pau. And Kraken has a similar front area too. But it's like, I think that I've found a lot of power in reframing the problems in such a way that like, what's the alternative to this? And am I more thankful to have this problem than to be dealing with the alternative of it, right? Like for example, with the Miata and then my Beamer, it's like sometimes I'm like, damn, like I have to do an oil change on each vehicle, and that's like each $100 plus like 4 hours of my time. But then I'm also like, hold on, like the alternative could be I have one vehicle, and then if that one breaks, I'm totally screwed. And now I have to panic and find stuff. And like, at least I have like I can move around and shuffle as I need. Like, that's something I'm thankful for. So I think that reframing it and also being conscious that the space I'm in doesn't revolve around me, although my life through my eyes is literally revolving around me, the world isn't.
Yeah.
So if I'm in a space where I'm unable to be productive, then I have the opportunity to go to a space where I can be productive.
Yeah. I think I'm constantly reminded of this, especially with working on my car, because I had my my clutch fail a few months ago, and we had to take we took advantage of a 4-day weekend that eventually turned into a 5-day weekend to work on this car for 18 hours a day for 5 days straight to get it done. And I was fucking dreading it. I did not want to do it at all. I was not excited. Sander intentionally acted more positive around me.
I was super happy-go-lucky because I knew that if we went into it like super down, it was just gonna crush us.
Yeah,
it was a big job.
It fucking sucked,
and it got bigger too because there was more stuff we found that we had to fix.
Yeah, but I think at the halfway mark, I started to think about, the last time my transmission went out, it was 4 years ago. It took me 3 months to do on my own in my parents' garage with them breathing down my neck to finish it up and get it done, all while I had no money to do it. So I had to find a way to pay for it, like figure out how to do it on my own, and under the pressure of my parents constantly jumping up my ass about it. And I was really grateful I was almost grateful to be in the opportunity to fix my car because I had a shop to do it with and somebody to help me.
Yeah. The alternative could be you could have the same car and not have any mechanical knowledge and not have a shop and have someone else to pay for it. And while it's at the shop, not have a mode of your own transportation to get around. And then God knows what they find.
Right.
And then, so.
Yeah. And I would even rather have.
So powerful.
I would even rather have a fun car that I love that isn't reliable with a friend in a shop who are willing to help me fix it than drive a boring ass car every day that never breaks.
Yeah.
That's a trade that I'm willing to make.
You should try driving a boring car that breaks anyway. So do you think that we choose to be charitable, or is it inherent to our nature? Is there some way to practice being charitable if it's not inherent to our nature and we can actually develop it? What do you think?
I think it feels the best to do of all things. I'd say it's a good treatment for depression, right? Say if you're feeling a little lousy about yourself, the best way is, I would say, to begin with helping others. And by helping others, you discover that you are of value to them and thus of value inherently. And then you start to value yourself and see that you can serve a purpose outside of what's between your own two ears. So I would say start with that. Start small, hold doors, say hello, offer a conversation, and volunteer where you see fit.
That's interesting because it kind of contradicts the idea. I feel like there's an idea that's underlying in a lot of people's minds where it's like you can't love someone else unless you first learn to love yourself. And I feel like that kind of contradicts it, which in an interesting way that I like, because it's like, even if you don't love yourself in the moment, if you learn to love the people around you, you will find the love for yourself.
Right.
Sugar the egg. There's a leap of faith on both ends. Probably.
Yeah.
There's a funny quote. After I went through a really bad breakup and I was still in love with the girl, I found a quote that it was in response to the quote that is, before you love others, you must first learn to love yourself. And it said, let me see if I can get this right. Fuck that. I loved this girl so much. It made me forget about how much I hated myself. I need to get her back. And I did, and it didn't work. But I think that it feels personally to me, I get a huge dopamine hit from gift giving. I absolutely love it. So it was our birthday. We have birthdays pretty close to each other recently. And, I'm addicted to Sander most of the year, but around gift giving times, I show my love for somebody through getting them a gift that I think they will like based on my read of the character. So the better I know you, the better the gift will be. And, if I like you a lot, I'm going to put a lot of effort into it. Right. And I do that because I find it personally challenging to express my gratitude for somebody verbally very frequently. It's just not something I'm good at, but physical gestures I always feel mean more to me. So that's how I express it to other people. And that's something that I have grown up with my entire life. I've always felt that way. So I feel like in that sense, it's nature. But in terms of giving back and helping other people, I feel like that has changed since I was a kid. I don't feel like I was the helpful type or charitable type growing up. Not that I wished ill on people, but like I just didn't go out of my way to help other people, really. Right. I'm sure there are instances. Everybody has instances, right? But we all know the one guy growing up who would fall on a grenade for you, and you've only had 3 conversations with him, right? And I don't think I was ever really that person. Do you think you grew up, Sander, charitable?
I think so. I always liked helping other people. And, you know, like if a kid was struggling in class, like I'd always sit down with them and try to work them through the problem and stuff like that.
I've seen that firsthand.
I liked gifts and stuff like that. Like I liked making gifts for people if I couldn't afford them when I was little, you know, just like making cards and stuff like that. I always enjoyed like listening to other people's opinions and trying to like walk them through tough situations and stuff like that. I think there have been definitely points in life that have soured me a little bit.
Like what?
But, I had a very similar experience with a homeless man, actually.
Yeah.
So I ended up, like I met him on a street corner, and at that time I gave him a little bit of money, and then I saw him again, and I was like, hey, like, I'd like to get you like some like stuff, you know? So that time I went and got him some food, like from my pantry, and I brought that to him. And then the next time I saw him on that same spot, he was like, dude, like my tent got jacked or something like that. I think he said his tent got stolen from his buddy that kicked him out of the tent, something like that. And he was like, I don't have like a tent or blanket right now. I don't know where I'm going to stay. And I was like, no worries. Like, I'll go to Walmart. And so I went to Walmart. I got him a tent, and I had a spare blanket upstairs that I hadn't used yet. So I was like, I'll give him that blanket. And then he also had a dog with him at that point. So I was like, we got some dog food while I was at Walmart too. So I got him these things. And then I bumped into him again, and he was like, hey man, like, he was like actually in a different spot, and he was asking other people if they would give him money for a cell phone. And I was like, I'll get you a cell phone. So I went to Best Buy, and I got it was Best Buy or Walmart. I got a prepaid cell phone, like a flip phone. Like,
what was
$15 bucks.
Like
4 years ago? 4 years ago? Yeah, I was in college. Yeah.
Where did you see him? It's just out of curiosity, because like we all
on Babcock, on Eber and Babcock, on that intersection.
Okay, got it.
Down there.
Yeah.
So I saw him on that like little median strip along
Eber. So you go to Best Buy. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I saw him at Best Buy, he was actually at the Best Buy.
Got it.
So I went and got him a phone, and what?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I went and got him a phone, and we were talking, and then I would like get him like small things here and there, like food or whatever, like for about 4 months, like this change back and forth went on. And then suddenly he just like fell off the face of the earth. And then I get a text from like a few weeks later from a different number from him that's like, hey, I'm staying at my grandmother's place or something like that. And she lives in Melbourne. I had no idea that he had family in the area. He told me that he didn't have anyone he could stay with. And so I was like, oh, okay, like, what happened to your phone? And he was like, oh, like I had to pawn it. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, it was like the only thing I had of value. And I was like, well, like, what, like, why pawn your phone? Like, that's your only consistent connection point to get food or money or shelter items or dog food or anything has been me. So it's like, if you're going to go out there and pawn your phone, which is your only connection to me, that's probably a pretty rash decision. And it probably means that you weren't thinking, which leads me to believe that you were probably on drugs or trying to acquire drugs, right? And the additionally why I believe that is because later after that incident, I saw him at a 7-Eleven completely drugged out.
Yeah.
Totally drugged out. And so he then later on, many months later, texted me again from another number. And at that point, I just didn't respond. Like, I'd already spent a good amount of money, especially as like a kid working, for $15 an hour, also living off campus, trying to, make ends meet. I'd spent a good amount of money for me. And that kind of soured my perspective a little bit. And I think that perspective is still a little bit sour. I try to find other ways to give to homeless people other than just like directly money.
Yeah.
But I think overall I've been relatively charitable throughout my life. I do like giving back to people. When I cannot provide something of value to someone, I feel bad about it. Like if I'm too busy or like I just don't want to do it or whatever, I do feel bad. So
that experience hasn't soured your.
It's soured it in some ways.
Maybe matured.
Maybe matured. I think it's a better word. Yeah. Soured's not a great way to put it.
Informed.
It's informed me. It's matured me. And I think through that experience and also many other experiences, I'm able to come out of it with a more clear mindset about, or a perspective about the people around me and the world around me. But additionally, I've started to use a lot more like comedic relief in my life to kind of like make those moments feel better. Mm-hmm. Like with the accident, like we'll joke sometimes about like, having a bad day or something like that. And I'll be like, man, like if you want to make your day better, just T-bone someone in an intersection. It goes great. Like stuff like that, like makes it a little bit better. But yeah, I've always liked giving. Mm-hmm. I try to do what I can. Sometimes I have better gifts. Sometimes I have not as good gifts. Mason had a really good gift for me this year. So I feel
you did too.
Yeah. Yeah. Very.
It's like we're friends or something.
Yeah. He got me a watch that is a model, you would say, of my favorite racing driver, Albert Senna. And so the watch is kind of like built in his colors of Brazil and also his helmet colors from when he raced. And it comes in a helmet case. And so you open it up and then the watch is displayed and stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very pretty. Very pretty. Yeah. I was going to wear it today, but I was wearing it around the house and it was like too loose. And I was like, damn it, I want to wear it so bad. I wanted to wear it yesterday too. And it frustrated me because I was like, I want it on my wrist, but it's okay. I'll get it fixed I'll get it not fixed, but adjusted on Monday. And I'll be able to wear it.
Yeah. In any case, do you feel, so Christian's homeless man struggled with alcohol. Yours struggled with something different. Maybe heroin, is there some type of drug?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I had a conversation with Grace this morning about this, interestingly, because she grew up in a rough area with a lot of people who have suffered to those vices. And I even have people closer to me in my life who've suffered with those. But there's a perspective of people who were addicted to drugs and have gone through rehab and are healed. And they say that sometimes they miss the simplicity of life that comes with being addicted to drugs, because every morning that you wake up, it doesn't matter where you wake up or how hungry you are, because the only thing you're thinking about is how you're going to get your fix. And then once you get it, you've completed that task and you can go to sleep again.
There's some great stand-up comedy skits about like being homeless during an election cycle. It's like, the comedy skit is essentially like how great it must feel to wake up every day and just not give a fuck about like politics or who's the president or what's going on with law, like to just not give a shit. Mm-hmm. Like, and the comedy skit's really funny. It's like a 5-minute piece. But it's interesting that you mentioned that there's like an associated freedom with homelessness. It was something that my mom talked to me about quite a bit. Was there was a large push in the Boston area to get homeless people off the streets or, out of like certain neighborhoods, and then to like collect them at like a center where they could like get a job and then like work their way up back into like, a more traditional sense of society.
I think they call them the rehabilitation centers for the homeless, right?
Yeah. Well, there's different kinds of places, right? There's more, privately funded and publicly funded.
There was a lot of both in the Boston area.
Wife helped to start a preschool at one nearby for homeless single women and
That's awesome.
Their children. And they'll, they have to come in, and it's a faith-based center. So they come in, they vow against, drugs and alcohol and whatever they were addicted to, and they're given a place to live, and they're given education routes. Through like trades and stuff like that. And they're forced to go into these Bible studies and, commit to giving faith a shot. And their kids are, they're given this opportunity to attend preschool, and it's all donation based. It's not for profit. And very cool things happen from there, right? And these women get cleaned up, and they have this opportunity in a space with other people who, some fail out, some continue. But there's places like that. That's one. I can't remember the name of that one. There's another one by the boathouse called CETA.
I haven't heard of it.
Christ is the answer, and it's that for men. And it's downtown Melbourne area.
That's awesome because the Daily Bread is down there too.
Yeah, I think so.
For the homeless. Yeah.
But the point I was trying to make real quick with my mom was like, she had the opinion that, or not even really the opinion, she'd met people in real life that were like, I am happier being homeless than I am being put in like a shelter home or something like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, from her perspective, was like, I feel bad for those people that they feel as though they are being forced into this like box of society that they just don't want to live in. And it's like, I understand both sides of it. I understand the side of like, if you're in a literal city, like it's a problem if there's a large homeless population on the street, right? Like, maybe you could go live in like the Adirondacks or like whatever, right? Like, not just say like, get out of my town. That's not what I'm trying to say. But like, there's other opportunities that are more rural that like, maybe you could start something for smaller and cheaper, like, another system at play or something, whatever. Like, I understand like the different sides of it. But it's interesting that the freedom associated with like just being like homeless and having nothing to worry about is definitely something that I think, I've thought about too. Is like when I think about like where I live and like paying rent and utilities and the cars and, getting around and then getting to work and like blah, 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 blah. It's like, sometimes I wish that it was like super, super simple. You know what I mean?
Well, it's complicated. Go ahead.
I think it's an interesting perspective because you're saying like, okay, yeah, it's possible these people have these like off-grid spirits, right?
Yeah.
And might they be served better to actually go off-grid than to be living in this juxtaposed world where everything is supposed to be very civilized?
Much better put than I put it. Yeah.
And in a way, it's like, yeah, they're not happy, and they're viewed almost as parasitic to our society, where they're just, hey, like, give me what you can. I'm stuck in this addiction cycle. I don't know how to get out of it. Help me in what way you can. Some of that's going to go towards feeding themselves. Some of it's going to go back into their cycle. So wouldn't they be better served, going elsewhere? But they just don't have the clarity for it. And it's interesting.
It is interesting, and it's especially interesting because homeless people, it doesn't feel entirely fair to say get out of my city, like you say.
Right.
Because
I don't think that's fair.
No, I know. I'm playing with the idea.
Yeah.
Because on the one thing, on a humanitarian level, you feel for these people, and on the other hand, if you don't contribute to a society, should you be there? Because then you're just taking.
Well, on the other hand, too, it's like you can't ignore the stories of people who were, followed by someone homeless home or, bad situations or bad encounters or, violent encounters and stuff like that. And it's not even, I don't even want to claim it's the fault of the homeless person. Like, there are 1,000 different factors in that homeless person's life that could be causing them to do something rash and stupid.
Right.
It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be conflict. It could be jealousy.
Yeah.
It could be desire.
Psychosis.
It could be psychosis. It could be any number of things, right? And those things could have also been the reasons that they became homeless too. So there's 1,000 different factors, but it's like, I understand both sides of it, because it's like, at the same time, you can't ignore the statistics about safety.
Right.
And you have to be able to, create a safe society for you and your family and live somewhere where you feel comfortable and can walk outside on the street without being worried about the probability of something negative happening. But at the same time, they are kind of living their freest life in where they want to live. I would take it, right? Or, maybe they don't have the mental bandwidth at that time to be able to really think big picture, like you said, sort of, right?
I think that the beauty of living in that simplicity comes at a cost, though, because you can wake up every day and not like have one goal, but that goal doesn't really give you purpose. It's a very materialistic thing. Even getting high, which isn't really materialistic, but it's very rudimentary, right? And I don't feel like that leads to a fulfilling life. But something that inspires me about the rehabilitation centers, like the one that your wife has started, is I feel that it can take somebody from that simplistic life and then give them the opportunity to find purpose, which will lead to a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, it helps. It's like training wheels, right? And it's option giving. One of the ways that we could view like what the freedom is that they feel in addiction is we all worship something, right? They're just different things, right? Someone could say they worship God, and then someone who is addicted, they worship that substance. That substance is what makes them feel like they might be complete. And anyone who's an alcoholic will say like, well, it's just this feeling that the next drink is going to make everything better. Right. And it never happens, but it's just oh yeah, I think I'm on the right track. And it's like they have faith in the substance, but the substance doesn't allow them to keep operating in a way that the rest of their life can be constructed around. So, yeah.
What do you feel your purpose is? Not life's purpose, not what's the reason for life, but you specifically, what do you think you're meant for? It's a complicated question.
Yeah, to be who I'm called to be, and that's purposefully vague because it's something new every day. Mm-hmm. We are, liquid beings in a way. We shape to the environments that we're put into, and I think I'll continue to be new things all the time. I've always joked that I want to have like 60 different jobs in my life. I don't want like one career.
Right.
And I'm kind of on track to being like that. But, I'd like to be a great son. I'd like to be a great husband. I'd like to be a great dog dad. I'd like to be a great,
human
dad of humans, right?
How does having a child fit into your picture of purpose?
Picture of purpose. I loved being a kid. And I want to generate that life force again. And I think by creating strong families, we can best resolve these things in our society. Mm-hmm. By creating strong families, by being that example of creating strong families, that we won't have as many issues. And also by helping take care of families that have fallen apart.
Do you think that there is purpose to your... Do you think that if you were to go through your life and not have a child or a kid or whatever, do you think your wife would still have the same purpose or the same potential for like a great purpose? Or do you think that like having a child is such a fundamental building block of what your purpose is that like, although you can build around it, it's not really complete otherwise? Does that sort of make sense?
No, I think it makes complete sense. That's why I always say like God willing fatherhood.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Because who knows? Might happen, might not. Plan is right now for it to happen. And I see, people choose not to have kids. That's great.
I don't mean to be like a negative aura to me asking a question.
No. It's
I'm curious as like, I kind of picture it as like the purpose in your life could be like a ring of a bunch of different things, mm-hmm. but like there's still a hole in the middle, and that hole in the middle could be filled by like a kid or like starting like your generation of the family. Is that kind of how you picture it?
No, and
kind of
like it could be, that say people have trouble getting pregnant, mm-hmm. right? And some people take it like really to heart that they can't have their own, bloodline continued in this rich historic tradition of a sense, but then also like it's a terrible experience to go through when you have troubles with pregnancy. And who's not to say that, if you still want to have a role in raising children and just giving them love and chance and hope and opportunity, that you can't still do so through other outlets. But it's really just about other people, mm-hmm. They can be little ones, they can be old ones. We're all just little ones that have become bigger ones. And I just loved having a family. Having that example of my parents, I would love to be that for, I'd love to repeat that. Yeah. For the next generation.
It sounds less of an egotistical stereotypical, I want to carry on my legacy and my namesake, and more so, you have such passion for the life that you led growing up that you'd love to be able to give that to someone else, your child, biologically or otherwise, right?
And I have spent more time with children since I started dating my wife. We have 2 nephews and a niece. Spending time around children reminds you how interesting life really is. The way that they play, the things that they're interested in, the stuff that they say. It just reminds you how great life is and how it doesn't have to be as serious all the time and how it can be detrimentally serious. I think it's just a beautiful part of life. It's like a flavor of food almost. Age, it's like, wow, I haven't had something this savory in a while.
Right.
And like children are kind of like that.
What flavor is old age, do you think?
Old age, like melt in your mouth barbecue.
Are you looking forward to it?
I think so. I try not to.
Just be present and enjoy the moment.
Try not to look forward to the future.
If there's any one piece of advice you could give to someone to try to work on being more present, what would you start with?
I would start with their breath, paying attention to it, giving prayer a shot casually, and keeping a journal.
What do you love about journaling?
I love that it has given me the sense to audit my time and my attention, those things I think about, to create a sort of budget for my time and my attention, to prioritize those things that I can just dump out onto a page, and to just catch those thoughts that might be swimming overhead. It's like a net, right, in murky water that you can just flail around. And once you have that pen in your hand, if you're just flailing around, sometimes something really great just ends up on the page, and that becomes a really big part of your life. And you can remember it, because so many of the things that we like turn the aperture up and down on in our brain, we forget that that's really an important part of us. And once it's down on paper, we can put a bookmark in it and know to return to it to help us remember why it's so important to us.
Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Dossett.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The audience find you if they're interested in more of your content or work?
Right now, everything can be found at christiandossett.com. That's www.christiandossett.com.
His name will be in the description too, so you guys.
We'll put a link to the podcast as well.
And a link to the website as well, and your podcast too.
The Dossett Den, Christian's podcast, was a huge piece of inspiration for me when starting the Vision 79 podcast with Sander.
I listened to it on the way here. Yeah, I listened to your it was the social media one.
Yeah,
like kind of like getting rid of your social medias and how you are only consuming what is fed to you rather than creating your own diet. Right. Like is essentially kind of like the gist that I got from it. At least,
yeah,
I listened to that on the way here.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I've missed you. I'm happy to hear you're doing well, and hopefully we'll have you again on in a few months or maybe a year and tag back up with you again.
I would love nothing more. Thanks for having me.
We like to close each podcast out with a brief segment that I call Dialing In. We usually have wide-ranging conversations today, especially so, about a wide variety of topics. But I like to summarize with one quote in particular to think about going forward as you get back to work and get on with the rest of your week. Today's is an Alex Hormozi quote. It goes, "Everyone's trying to be someone, but very few people are trying to be themselves. Just focus on being yourself."